Howdy, folks. My name is William Labanchnik, and I have a testimony to share about my faith in the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, or better said, my renewed faith. And in order to follow along on this, there's some things you need to know about me. I was born and raised Lutheran, thanks to my wonderful grandmother. Even went to a Christian school, and unfortunately, I had troublesome teens. Once I left this Christian school, I had to leave it at the end of junior high and went to high school and felt completely lost. I had no friends and was on my own. Well, this lost way would continue for a while, and despite the fact that I loved my life and lived my life, around the time I was 21 years old, a series of events came together which completely shattered me and broke my heart. It included the death of my grandmother, having to move away from my home, my childhood home, new individuals in the mix, and just a culmination of horrendous events at the time that destroyed me and pushed me off my path, and I completely lost my way. Unfortunately, I turned to alcoholism and fell in with the wrong crowd, and I mean wrong crowd, extremely bad individuals. Really bad. And this went on for a number of years until, thanks to my alcoholism, I screwed things up, ruined my life. Best said, I lost my ex-girlfriend, I lost a job, I lost everything I had, wound up in jail. And instead of facing those and that finally waking me up, I kind of picked up and ran away to Germany, so to say, to these individuals that I thought were my friends. Hung around with them, and things got worse. I left my mother behind and hung around with these individuals, and that actually culminated in me having a bad accident where I fractured my skull, had cerebral hemorrhaging, and wound up flatlining on the table. My heart stopped, and the doctors had to resuscitate me. From that point, I kind of woke up. I found spirituality, so to say, or I was on the search for God. I pulled away from all those friends, went my own way. I turned to a lot of New Age things, Buddhism, Taoism, and a lot of these things helped in a way, but didn't give me the fulfillment that I completely needed. And I was on that path for a while, still felt empty, still felt lost. I got filled a little bit more when the Lord blessed me in my times of trouble with just an amazing woman. I always say my angel, and her name is Angela. If you say in Italian, Angela mia, it means my angel. And I always tell her that she's blessed me more than I could have ever imagined. And you'd think that would be enough, to make a man happy with his life. But it was always my intention to move back to America. And I was closer than ever right before I met her. Well, then things started off with her. I fell in love, and that delayed things. It's a good thing, you're in love is always a good thing. But that delayed things, and we talked about it, and I actually found someone that wanted to move to America with me. And I thought, wonderful, now I'm truly blessed, I just got to get home, In that time, my mother suffered a series of incidents and wound up in a coma. I thought we were going to lose her. I'm blessed to still have her around, even though her health is poor now and she's bedridden, but she's hanging in there. She's staying in good spirits for the most part, and thankful for that as well. Anyway, just as my wife were getting closer than ever to move in, or planning our move, my wife got pregnant. Again, a new challenge, but such a blessing. My daughter is absolutely adorable, even though at the moment she's very overwhelming. She's in her terrible threes. Threes are horrible for For anyone that doesn't have kids yet, it's a challenge, more than you could ever realize. But the fact of the matter is, we're alone here, my wife and I, and trying to get things together and trying to get to America. And we had huge financial issues even before my daughter came, and then once my daughter was there, that compounded the difficulties. And it's just been a series of things, rocks, stones continuously thrown in our way, and despite blessings at the same time. But the fact of the matter is, it all got to be a little bit too much for my wife and I. And there was one day about 6 months ago, we exploded at each other. Things got really out of hand. I've seen her angrier than I've ever seen her before. I got angrier than I think I've ever been in our relationship. My daughter, poor little girl, was screaming and crying, and it was just a horrible situation. I remember breaking down and thinking, I'm going to lose it. I consider myself a strong individual, but I was in tears, and I remember even saying, I can't live like this anymore. I don't want to live like this anymore. And it got really out of hand, and thankfully we all calmed down. And the following day I told my wife, I said, I got to get out into nature. You see, I'm an avid hiker, avid nature lover, and it always does me good. And I got this hiking staff. This is very relevant to the story. I got this hiking staff that meant so much to me. And I've had it for many, many years, and I've hiked hundreds of kilometers or miles, if you will. And it means so much to me, to the point that I thought, God, when we move to America, I hope I'm able to bring this with, because it's a piece of nature, and customs is a little bit out of control sometimes. So I had panic attacks about whether or not I could bring my hiking staff with. Well, after this horrendous day where I basically said to the heavens, I can't live like this anymore. I don't want to live like this anymore. I was out here hiking, and I was here at this very spot where I am now, right in the midst of wild boar territory. You see the markings everywhere, hunting stand just down the way. And I see this pile of stones right behind me. It's not very visible, but it looks almost like they're man-made stacked. So I'm sitting there thinking to myself, wow, that's strange the way it looks. And I think there's a voice comes into my head and said, there's something under there that you need to find. And I get excited. I think, oh my God, it's like a lost artifact, or maybe a robber buried his money, or something like that, ludicrous ideas actually. But I thought, okay, there's something under there that I need to find. A voice told me. So I stick my hiking staff in there. I'm trying to loosen the rocks, and I pull, and the staff breaks. It shatters. And therewith, my soul shattered. This horrendous night, the evening before, where my whole family was screaming and in tears, and we're just all at our end, and life just too overwhelming. And now this hiking staff that I had sleepless nights about how I'm going to bring it to America with me, breaks. And my soul broke with it. And I looked at it, and I stood there shocked and heartbroken. I'm looking at these pieces laying on the ground, and I'm thinking, God, all these things in my life just coming together, and now this, the one simple thing I had breaks and shatters. And I said, it's like watching myself shatter. And metaphorically it was. So I'm standing there, and I'm looking at it, and I'm thinking, what now? And as I'm staring at this thing, I'm thinking about a sermon that I had heard recently, at that time, a few days beforehand, from Joel Osteen, Pastor Joel Osteen, out of Houston, Texas, Lakewood Church. And he had said something about emptying out the negative. And that's what it felt like. I looked on these two pieces of my broken hiking staff, and I thought, I can't do it anymore. I can't do it alone anymore. So I took the hiking staff, and I put it together like you see it right now. This was approximately 6 months ago. I'm going to let you take another look. I put it in the sign of a cross, and I don't think it's going to stay. I don't have a tripod or anything, so it's there in the sign of a cross. And I look at it and I fall down on my knees in front of the cross that I had built out of my broken hiking staff, and I prayed like I never prayed before. I lowered my head onto the cross. I wept tears like I never wept before. And I said, Lord, I can't do it on my own anymore. I can't do it on my own. I want to empty out the negative. I want to get it out of my system. All these problems I face, all these challenges, the culmination of events, the anger I've had in the past, the mistakes that still haunt me, everything. I put it into your hands. Please help me. Take this weight off of my shoulders. And no joke, on that day as I'm sitting here kneeling before this cross, the sun comes through, shines directly upon the cross, right in front of me. And those stones that I had moved, I know there's a natural explanation for this, but at the time, those stones that I had shifted around, as the sun shone down, there came a puff of smoke. Obviously condensation, something along those lines, but the way it billowed up was like watching a spirit in front of me. As if the Lord said, I hear your prayer. And I remember sitting there a while and weeping, even though I'm a strong grown man. I had to let it out. I'm talking decades of pain and hurt and frustration and mistakes and disappointment, etc., etc. I gave it to the Lord and He took it upon Himself. And I felt the release. And I remember going back home and hugging my wife and daughter like I have never hugged them before. And I took my daughter up a hill on that very day and sang to her, "What a friend we have in Jesus," the very song they played at my grandmother's funeral. And I remember as I actually was playing Alan Jackson's version of the song on my phone, and I'll never forget my little girl, about 3 years old, looking up to the heavens and saying, "Isn't life beautiful, Daddy?" And I still, we struggle. Constant disappointments with the customs and immigration of trying to get my wife her visa so we can move to America. And shortly after this event, after putting my worries and troubles into the hands of the Lord, I was sleeping at night and a Bible verse came into my head in the middle of the night in a lucid dream. And I remember waking up and thinking, is it even a verse? Is my mind putting numbers together, or is someone actually telling me something? I woke up, grabbed my cell phone because I didn't have the Bible right next to me, and I looked up the verse John 6:21. It says something along the lines of, the disciples were out in a storm, and the storms were overwhelming, and they seen the Lord, and they invited Jesus into the boat, and immediately upon inviting Him into the boat, their boat was at the shores which they sought. How amazing is that? As my wife and I struggle with trying to get to America, and I'm overwhelmed with everything and heavy laden, that in a dream the Lord comes to me, and I was unfamiliar with the verse in all honesty, and basically says to me, invite me into your ship. Invite me into your ship, and I will take you home. Since that day, that's exactly what I've done. And I could tell you, it certainly hasn't been perfect since then. But I know, and I've seen, things are coming together. And I know When it does, it'll come together in ways better than I could have ever imagined. In fact, just recently, things got out of hand again, overwhelmed with work, and my daughter's terrible threes, disappointments from U.S. Customs regarding the visa, and other things I choose not to mention. And I reached a similar point and I said, Lord, you've already told me. You've renewed my faith one time. You've told me John 6:21. So now, Lord, I give it all to you again. Guide my ship. Take control of my vessel. It is in your hands. And I thank you for that. And you, dear viewer, I thank you for listening. Forgive me for getting emotional. It's very emotional for me, but sometimes when a piece of us breaks, it's so that something better can come along. And to conclude this story, funny thing is the very next day, I found a brand new hiking staff that fitted my hands even better. I miss the old one. I do. A lot of memories, a lot of miles walked, but you know what? It's here and always will be as a reminder of what we can overcome with faith in the Lord. Bless you and thank you for listening.